She was my boss, always in control, until one late night when her laugh slipped, her guard dropped, and 3 words changed everything: "You're driving me crazy." Most evenings in our office looked the same: quiet halls, glowing screens, and the soft clicking of keyboards. But tonight, the silence felt heavier. My boss, Clara, sat at the far end of the room, shoulders drawn tight as though the weight of the entire day still pressed down on her. She was 42, known for her precision, her sharp mind, her refusal to let anything slip. To everyone else, she was unshakable, a force to be respected and, in some ways, feared. But from where I sat, watching her through the low hum of fluorescent lights, I noticed something different. Her hand rubbed gently at her temple, a small motion she probably didn't even realize she was making. Papers were scattered across her desk, her pen tapping absent-mindedly against the corner of a file. She exhaled a long sigh, the kind that doesn't belong to a confident executive but to a tired woman who has carried too much on her own for too long. It wasn't something she'd ever let anyone else see, but staying late meant catching these rare fragments of her humanity. I told myself I stayed to finish work, but that wasn't the whole truth. There was something magnetic about her presence, the way she commanded a room, the way she masked her exhaustion with poise. I found myself wanting to be close enough to notice the cracks in her armor, close enough to know the version of her that the rest of the world never would. The air conditioner whispered in the background, cooling the room but not the tension that always seemed to thrum beneath my skin when she was near. Her blazer had slipped off the back of her chair, and for a fleeting moment, she looked less like my boss and more like a woman caught between strength and fragility. I wondered if she ever noticed how intently I listened when she spoke, how carefully I caught the tones of her voice, the little pauses between her words. I wondered if she could sense the quiet admiration I tried so hard to keep buried beneath professionalism. There's a certain ache in watching someone carry themselves with unrelenting control, because you start to wish you could be the person they lean on when they finally let it go. Tonight, sitting in that dim office while the rest of the world moved on without us, I realized just how much I wanted that role. Not to save her, not to replace her strength, but to be the one who caught her when she faltered. And maybe, just maybe, she already knew. The office after hours had its own rhythm. The clatter of keyboards and ringing phones were long gone, replaced by the hum of the AC and the faint shuffle of papers. Most of the building had slipped into shadow, but our corner still glowed with 2 pools of light, hers at the far desk, mine just close enough to catch glimpses when I looked up. She had been working for hours, and I could see the fatigue settling into her posture. Clara leaned back in her chair, stretching her arms above her head, her dark hair tumbling loose around her shoulders. She pinched the bridge of her nose and let out a small laugh, half exasperation, half surrender. That laugh was softer than anything I'd ever heard from her in a boardroom, and it sent something flickering through my chest. "You're driving me crazy," she said suddenly, her voice carrying across the quiet space. For a second, I thought she was scolding me. My head snapped up, only to find her eyes glinting with amusement rather than anger. There was a hint of vulnerability behind the words, like she wasn't sure whether to scold or to smile at the fact that I was still here, lingering in her orbit. The words hung in the air, charged, suspended. Something in me stirred, some mix of courage and carelessness that didn't feel like me at all. I let a faint smile play on my lips and answered before I could overthink it. "Then let me drive you home." The moment stretched, a stillness wrapping around us both. Her brows arched slightly, as though I'd caught her off guard. For someone who always controlled the pace, the agenda, the very air in a room, she suddenly looked like she didn't know whether to dismiss me, or accept the offer hiding between my words. She tilted her head, studying me in that way she did when she wanted the truth of someone's intentions. I kept my gaze steady, not with boldness, but with sincerity. I wasn't teasing her. I wasn't playing a game. I was simply offering her a way to step out of the exhaustion that clung to her shoulders. Her lips curved, just slightly, into something between disbelief and intrigue. The kind of smile that said, "I shouldn't, but maybe I will." And in that single exchange, her laugh, my reply, the silence that followed, I felt the ground shift beneath us. The lines between boss and employee, untouchable and admirer, began to blur. Not erased, not crossed yet, but softened in a way that made every second afterward feel charged with possibility. The city at night has a different personality, quieter, softer, almost like it exhales once the workday ends. That's how it felt as we stepped out of the office together. The parking lot was half empty, the glow of the streetlight stretching long shadows across the pavement. Clara walked beside me, her heels clicking softly against the concrete, her blazer folded neatly over her arm instead of draped across her shoulders. For the first time, she looked less like my boss and more like a woman finally allowing herself to breathe. When she slid into the passenger seat of my car, I caught the subtle shift in her posture. Gone was the rigid composure she wore like armor in the office. She leaned back, a quiet sigh escaping her lips as though even the simple act of sitting down was a relief. I started the engine, and the low hum filled the silence between us. At first, our conversation hovered near the safe edges, deadlines, tomorrow's meeting, the project that had kept her chained to her desk. But as the city lights blurred past the windows, something changed. She loosened her hair tie, letting her dark strands fall freely, and in that motion alone, the atmosphere softened. "You know," she said, her voice quieter now, almost reflective, "I used to stay late because I wanted to. Because I loved the chase, the pressure, the game of it all. Now," she trailed off, her gaze lost somewhere beyond the windshield. I glanced at her briefly before turning back to the road. "Now it feels heavier." Her lips curved in a faint, almost surprised smile. "Exactly. That's how it began, the unraveling." Our words drifted from work to music she grew up listening to the small cafes she used to visit with friends before her life became an endless string of boardrooms and late nights. I told her about the novel I once tried to write, the dream I had of traveling across Europe with nothing but a backpack and too much hope. She laughed then, a real laugh, warm and unguarded, filling the car in a way the office never could. And with each word, each shared memory, the distance between us felt smaller. Her shoulder brushed lightly against the seat near mine, and though it wasn't intentional, I felt the nearness like a spark. The car became more than just a ride home, it was a cocoon of quiet honesty, a space where the woman I admired from afar finally let me glimpse the softer truths she hid from the world. And for the first time, I wondered if she needed this ride just as much as I did. The traffic lights washed the car in alternating colors, red, green, amber, casting shifting shadows across Clara's face. At one intersection, as the car rolled to a gentle stop, silence threaded between us. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but heavy, pulsing with all the words neither of us dared to speak. She turned her head toward the window, her profile softened by the glow of passing headlights. For a long moment, she didn't say anything, and I told myself to focus on the road, to keep my hands steady on the wheel. But then she glanced sideways, her eyes catching mine with quiet intensity. It wasn't the calculating look she used in meetings, dissecting strategies, and weighing risks. This look was unguarded, tentative, as though she wasn't sure if she wanted to lean closer or retreat. My hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel, the leather creaking under my grip. I could feel the urge rising in me, to reach across the console, to let my fingers find hers, to close the impossible distance. But I held back. Not because I didn't want to, but because the air between us already burned with enough electricity to light the whole street. The soft scent of her perfume lingered, threading through the confined space of the car, and every breath I took seemed to draw me deeper into her orbit. She shifted in her seat, adjusting her blouse at the wrist, and the subtle brush of her elbow against the side of my arm sent a jolt racing up my skin. Neither of us moved away. Outside, the world blurred, a couple crossing the street, neon signs flickering, the faint rumble of another car in the next lane. But in here, time slowed. Her eyes drifted back toward the windshield, though I noticed the way her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something but thought better of it. I cleared my throat, breaking the spell just enough to keep us grounded. "You okay?" She nodded, a faint smile playing at the corner of her mouth. Just thinking. The light turned green, and I eased the car forward, though it felt like we had already crossed an invisible threshold. Nothing had been said outright. No rules had been broken. And yet, I knew, we both knew, that something was shifting between us. In that silence, in the restrained longing neither of us confessed, I felt the first undeniable truth: this ride was no longer just about getting her home. It was about everything we weren't saying. The neighborhood was quiet when I finally turned into her street, the kind of silence that only late hours can hold. My headlights cut across the rows of modest houses until they settled on hers, a two-story home with pale shutters and a single porch light flickering against the dark. I slowed to a stop, the gravel crunching softly beneath the tires, and killed the engine. Suddenly, the world around us went still. Clara didn't move right away. She sat there for a moment, her hands resting loosely in her lap, eyes fixed on the glow of her porch as if it were a lighthouse pulling her back into her private world. I studied her in the quiet, the way the light softened her features, the way exhaustion and grace seemed to live side by side on her face. When she finally unfastened her seatbelt, she didn't rush to leave. Instead, she lingered, her fingers tracing the edge of her blazer folded neatly across her arm. I could sense her hesitation, a reluctance to step back into the solitude waiting inside those walls. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice stripped of the firm authority I was so used to hearing in the office. There was no command in it, no expectation, just gratitude, simple and genuine. I nodded, meeting her gaze. "Anytime." She pushed the door open, the warm porch light spilling over her as she stepped out. I should have stayed seated, should have let the moment end there, but I couldn't. Something in me wanted to hold on to the night just a little longer, so I climbed out too, the cool air wrapping around us both. Clara turned, a little surprised, her expression caught between amusement and question. She leaned against the car door, blazer still tucked under her arm, and tilted her head slightly as though studying me in this new light. The faint breeze played with her hair, sending a strand across her cheek. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Our eyes locked, longer than they should have, deeper than was safe. There was no crowd, no office, no audience to remind us of the rules we were breaking. Just the two of us under the glow of her porch, standing in a silence that spoke louder than words. She smiled then, small and uncertain but real. And I realized that this was no longer about driving her home, it was about standing at the edge of something unspoken, something waiting to unfold. The night air felt cooler once I stepped out of the car, though I suspected it was less about the weather and more about the nearness of her. Clara stood by the door, her blazer pressed lightly against her hip, her eyes catching mine with a glimmer that was both steady and uncertain. The porch light above us hummed faintly, its glow soft but insistent, outlining her features in a way that made her seem impossibly close, impossibly real. She adjusted a loose strand of hair, tucking it behind her ear, and the motion was so uncharacteristically delicate that I found myself staring longer than I should have. I walked closer, not much, just a step, maybe two, enough that the space between us tightened. My heartbeat hammered in my chest, a rhythm too loud for the quiet street. "Long day," she said, almost as if to break the tension that lingered in the air. I nodded, my voice low. "For both of us." Her lips curved into a faint smile, but her eyes, those gave her away. They lingered on me just a fraction too long, softened with something she hadn't meant to show. For a second, I thought she might retreat into herself, slip back into the armor she wore so easily at work. But she didn't. She stayed right there, close enough for me to notice the faint lines at the corner of her eyes, the trace of tiredness in them, the vulnerability she rarely allowed anyone to see. And then it happened. As she shifted the blazer from one arm to the other, her hand brushed against mine. It was nothing dramatic, nothing scripted, just skin against skin in the smallest of ways. But the effect was immediate. My breath caught, my chest tightened, and I swear time stumbled for a second. I could have pulled back. Should have. But I didn't. I let the touch linger just a heartbeat longer than necessary. She didn't move away either. Instead, she looked at me with an expression caught between warning and invitation, her brows lifted ever so slightly, as though she was waiting to see if I'd crossed the invisible line hanging between us. I didn't. Not yet. The night wasn't asking for boldness, only honesty. And in that brief contact, in the quiet charge running from her hand to mine, we both understood something we couldn't put into words. This was more than coincidence. This was choice. The porch light buzzed above us, casting a soft halo that made the world feel smaller, more intimate, as though it had closed its doors and left just the two of us standing there. Clara didn't move right away. Her hand had slipped from mine, but the warmth of that fleeting touch lingered, buzzing faintly like static against my skin. She drew in a breath, her chest rising slowly, her eyes fixed on me with a steadiness I wasn't used to from her, not the commanding steadiness of my boss, but the vulnerable kind, the one that came when a person dared to let someone see them without their shield. "You really do drive me crazy," she whispered, her lips curving into a smile that carried more meaning than all the meetings, deadlines, and long nights we had shared. There was no sharpness in her tone this time, no teasing exasperation. It was a confession, pure and unpolished, laid bare under the hum of the light. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, my own smile tugging at the edges of my mouth. I didn't try to fill the silence with clever words. Sometimes, silence carried more weight than conversation ever could. So I stepped just a little closer, careful but certain, until the distance between us was barely more than the width of a breath. Her hand moved before mine did. She lifted it slowly, almost uncertain, and let her palm rest against my chest. The contact was gentle, but I felt it echo deep inside me, the warmth of her skin, the quiet strength in her touch, the unspoken question lingering between us. My heart thudded beneath her fingers, and I knew she could feel it, knew she could sense the way she unraveled the control I tried so hard to keep. I raised my hand, brushing lightly against her arm, tracing the line of her sleeve until I reached her hand. Our fingers didn't lock, but they lingered, testing, acknowledging. She tilted her head slightly, her eyes searching mine, as if she wanted to be sure that what she saw there wasn't just infatuation, but something steady, something real. And then, without hurry, without fear, she leaned into me. Her cheek pressed softly against my chest, her hair brushing my jaw. I wrapped my arms around her, not tightly, not possessively, but with the kind of steadiness that promised she didn't have to carry everything alone. There, under the hum of a flickering light, there were no labels. No boss. No employee. Just two people standing at the edge of something new, surrendering quietly to the possibility of what could be.